Hello and welcome to the Viva La Vulva podcast. I am your host, Dr. Cara Quant, and I'd like to thank you for joining me today on this special day. I feel like every podcast is a special day, but this one is especially special because I have the founder and CEO of Ceek Women's Health. Her name is Fahti Khosrow, and wanted to give a little bit of background about Fahti. She's been a leader in the healthcare space for over 15 years. She has a broad cross-functional experience spanning pharma and biotech and medical devices. She is passionate about bringing innovation to women's health. Yay. And challenging the status quo experienced by introducing products that are designed by women for women. So thank you, Fati, for being on today's podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited about this conversation.
Thank you for being here. So let us dive into it. So a little bit of background about speculums for people who don't know. A speculum is that device that is used for pap smears to look inside the vagina to see if there's anything going on. Usually we're using it for swabbing the vagina or definitely pap smears where we're testing and screening for cervical cancer. Among other things, they use it to place things inside the vagina, like IUDs. So that is essentially what a speculum is. And there's definitely a history of speculums dating all the way back to the ancient Egypt and Rome, so thousands of years ago, where it used to be wood and maybe metal to examine the orifices of the body, so the nose or the mouth or the ears or and the vagina. Up until the 19th century, many physicians and patients feared that by penetrating the vagina, the speculum would tear the hymen, covering its entrance, resulting in loss of virginity, which is should be dispelled and is definitely not the case that we know now. And there was someone that was pretty vital in gynecology and creating gynecological tools, which was Dr. Jason Marion Sims. And he was basically revered to be the father of gynecology, developing his surgical techniques by doing experiments on enslaved Black women. And his specialty mainly was repairing vaginal fistulas, which is essentially a communication between one place to another. So the vagina to the bladder or to the rectum. And this usually was a complication during childbirth. And so when he used these enslaved Black women, they were oftentimes not anesthetized, even though it was readily available in the late 1800s when he was doing it. And so essentially, up until this point of 2025, which we're recording it in, we have been using the same speculum that was created by Dr. Sims years and actually centuries ago, more than a century ago, which is that like rounded hollow cylinder with the rounded end that is divided into like a hinge part, and it basically looks like a duck bill. So that is where we come to today. And so when I went to the conference, which is called the International Society of the Study of Women's Sexual Health, or ISHWISH, and came across the table with Nella Speculum, and I was like, what? This is amazing. Like this is like really revolutionizing what a speculum is because we've been using it for centuries. So getting to you, Fati, what was the reason why you or what the inspiration for creating the Nella Speculum?
Well, thank you so much for sharing that history. It was very thorough. And actually I want to go back, which is if you look at a speculum from 1901, there's a museum in British Columbia actually that has one. And if you compare it to the speculum today, there's very little difference between them. So the speculum hasn't changed. What inspired me to update the speculum was, well, I was in the oncology field for many years. I worked in pharma, so I actually saw how much money went into R&D. And then I got married, and my husband and I went through 3 years of infertility treatment. We did 7 rounds of IVF, which really opened my mind into what it meant to be a patient. And, for somebody who saw my OBGYN when I wanted birth control, suddenly having to see heavily invested in this infertility journey. And we traveled across the country, multiple clinics, etc. And I now have two daughters. One is 10 and one is 13. But I remember when my second daughter was born, I was reflecting on this crazy journey that I had. And the one thing that stood out for me was the speculum. And, getting a pelvic exam is really not a pleasant experience for most women, right? I mean, think of it. We go to an exam room, typically cold. We lie on our backs. We put our foot in a stirrup that, if not thousands, at least 100 women have put their feet into it. Somebody comes, uses a speculum, somebody that we don't know that well, typically, often a stranger, does the exam. Then she's done. He or she leaves, and then we're kind of left. Like, you have to wipe yourself with something. There's nothing there. And you go back, and for some women, and I want to highlight this, women who've had a history of sexual trauma, that's 47%, the recent data of women have had a history of sexual trauma in the US. Women who have gone through infertility treatment, like myself, there's actually physical pain after the exam. That's bleeding, that's soreness, that's difficulty sitting or walking. There's actual pain. And that just doesn't go away instantly. And then there's the mental impact of it. And what it boils down to is there's an element of dignity that needs to be going through that exam. And the tools that are used in that exam really make that process very difficult and challenging, especially when we look at where we are in the 21st century. I mean, we are on the 16th version of the iPhone. We send people to the moon. We are, look at men's health, for example. Viagra is offered to men, fully covered by insurance, even offered to men free of charge. There's a tablet format of it, and recently a chewable version of it introduced. And then for an exam that is so intimate, to have devices that are so antiquated to be used on women, it's just extraordinary. And I go back to the speculum because a speculum is used about 90 million times every year in the US only. That's 90 million times. And and we go back to this, which is what a hammer is to a carpenter is what a speculum is to a clinician. Without it, they can't do their job. So, and it's an older device, so it had to get updated. I did a lot of research. I actually put my own money into it. I resigned from my job, started Ceek Women's Health, and developed the Nella Speculum, working with a team of women designers and engineers to develop the speculum. And what's different about it is, one, that it's very narrow. It's narrower than a regular size tampon. Second is that it's not cold. So it took a lot of time making sure we chose the right material for this product. It's quiet, it's not clanky and loud. That's just the basic to make it palatable for patient. It offers a lot of benefits for clinicians too, which is makes it easier to see the cervix. It has a light so the clinicians can see what they're doing. It's ergonomic. I think in 1845, when Dr. Sims developed the speculum, ergonomics wasn't even a word there. So that's how Nella was born. It's registered with the FDA. And what I'm very proud of was a few years ago, we won the Time Award for the best invention of the year. So for the Nella Speculum. And we're excited as being used.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a absolute game changer. I mean, I used it. I got a couple samples from the conference and have used it on patients, and like they've raved about it. I mean, one was like, yeah, it feels so much different. She rated it a 10 out of 10 in terms of like the actual exam. It was way more narrow than the normal speculum that we used in the clinic. And I specifically used the more plastic one. And yes, it's still very clanky, and usually it causes patients pain. And I try and do it as gently as possible. But sometimes, people have had trauma, sexual trauma from even, going to the doctor's office. And so they're very hesitant often about doing it. But this particular patient was like, I give it a 10 out of 10. It was great. I really enjoyed having the speculum, and I would like want it to be in the clinic. So yeah, I've seen, even just using it a few times, seeing that it's different than the speculum that we've been using for many many years.
Yeah, and I think you're also at the mercy of the tools that you currently have. So if you don't have it, there's no there's no other option out there. I mean, I was actually, to be honest, very surprised. I remember, like, this was about 10 years ago. I sat down and did a Google search to see, has anybody else developed a better speculum? And I was really surprised that there wasn't another option out there and nobody had. But as I went through this journey, I'll tell you a few things that have really struck me, which is why does, even in women's health, even when it comes to the speculum, up until now recently, like, why are so many poorly designed products used on a woman's vagina? Like, you talked about the plastic speculum, the one that's traditionally available. Well, it's made from a very cheap plastic. That means when it's under pressure, it can break inside the body, and there's numerous cases of that documented with the FDA. Can you imagine, like, if a speculum broke inside of me, I would die. Like, I don't think I would even go see my doctor anymore. Like, that should not be the case. Or you see some speculum which are super cheap, which the edges of it are so rough. Well, when you're using a speculum where the edges are so rough, it can cause bleeding down there. It is just so bizarre to me that we all, when it comes to women's health, it's driven to the cheapest product. It's just not acceptable. It's funny, I was talking to the sourcing person at a hospital, and she was telling me, oh, this is so much more expensive than what, and we're talking about a matter of like cents here, right? We're not talking about like 100% increase in
Yeah.
price.
Yeah.
And I finally looked at her and I said, why? Why are you driving the cost down so much on this? I mean, this is ridiculous. Like, women deserve dignity. If you spend a few cents more, you get a superior product. Like, why are you arguing with me on this when I know how much money you're wasting on other areas? I mean, it's just, it's crazy to me, right? Like, it's like asking, I'll give you an example. If you look at a telephone from the 1900s versus today, that telephone doesn't even exist now. Or Walkmans. Do we even know? Like, you have
Well, I
our
don't remember what a
generation.
Walkman is,
What
but
is a
yes, I
Walkman?
mean,
Nobody knows what it
yeah, I
is.
mean, from then to now, like it's
It's
different,
just,
very different. There's no Walkman.
there's a Walkman, right? So anyway, but the speculum has stayed the same.
Mm,
So I in taking a step back, I think I have realized is women have the right, and I go back to this, women have the right to develop, to receive high quality healthcare. It's a right. It's not a nice to have. It's a must have. And I think it goes back to every element of women's health, whether it's maternal health, whether it's a pelvic exam, etc. It really needs to be dignified, and it needs to reflect, I'm not talking about like extravagant technology, just common sense product that makes the exam, whatever it is, more dignified and in higher quality. And the US now, when you compare us to the modern world, we're ranked at the very, I don't want to say at the very bottom, but we're not ranked at the top. I think for maternal health, we're like number 32 or like some crazy number. So overall, I just feel women's health needs to improve. We're tackling it from a well women's exam perspective, really to encourage women to see their clinician every year for an exam. It's just the right thing to do rather than having anxiety, pain, or whatnot keep them away. When we looked at actually data, I think 50% of women delay getting an exam, 70% skip getting an annual exam. So it's, I mean, and I don't blame them because I was one of those people myself. So, but hopefully we can tell women there's a better option available to them, help reduce their anxiety, and just get them to the clinic wherever in a timely manner.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, going off of your point of the yeah, the technology not keeping up. I mean, I feel like that is for so many things. I mean, even recently, like back in 20, definitely in the 2000s, the anatomy of the clitoris was discovered. Like, how
Right.
is it? I mean, it's not an invention, but like even it just anatomical wise, like how is it that we're just now discovering the full anatomy of the clitoris? And, there's medicines and things that are helping to improve men's, erectile dysfunction and things like that, but we're now just discovering the anatomy of the clitoris. And I mean, that goes, I feel like, across the board when it comes to just research, medical research for women, including the clinical trials. Most of the trials are on men and generally white men. And so, how do you take a study that is mainly on this cohort of people and apply it to the general population and across races, across, gender? And so it's definitely a disparity in many different aspects, but definitely, yes, women's health and the gynecological health of women as well.
I did not know that about the clitoris, to be honest. I think that was, I'm kind of shocked actually. I also learned we were having an event with Halle Berry, who's very active in the menopause space too. But she was actually telling me that menopause is less than a chapter in medical school and residency programs. And so clinicians weren't even trained on menopause in order to be able to treat women on menopausal women until quite recently, which was surprising to me.
Yeah, and I can say that firsthand that no, we didn't get a lot of information about menopause, how to
Right.
treat it, like hormone therapy was still, I mean, when I was in medical school, which was 2010, I mean, they were still very against like hormone therapy for women during menopause. And even for women who don't want to do hormones because of a history of like cancer or what have you, we didn't have those tools of like what other medicines can be given to help with reducing hot flashes and
Right.
night sweats and different things like that. So yeah, and menopause is definitely a disparity in terms of like the medical information and even just sexual health stuff. So I mean that was the main reason why I created Viva La Vulva, was because that lack of information around women's sexual health. I mean, for women who had pain with sex or problems with orgasm, I didn't learn that in medical school and
Yeah.
even in residency.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I and actually having the courage to openly talk about sexual health, and especially when we look at different ethnicities and cultures and backgrounds, it's very nuanced.
Yeah, it is. Definitely nuanced. What other feedback have you been giving from like healthcare providers and even patients about the Nella Speculum?
It's really interesting. So let me tackle the patient side of it before we talk about the HCP side of it. From a patient perspective, before I started the company, I decided to just survey women to see, does the average woman even know what a speculum is? I knew it because of my journey, but does the average woman even know what a speculum is? And the feedback was, and this was a blinded survey we did. The question was, actually exactly what, do you know what a vaginal speculum is? 90% of women know what it is. They actually know if a metal speculum or a plastic speculum was used on them, and they don't like it. And we repeat that survey on an ongoing basis. But separate from that, I can just give you some anecdotal information, which is like we were at a restaurant and I had my demo kit open. I was talking to actually an investor at that point in time, and the server came and she said, "Wow, I didn't know I could find one of those on my table." So that was that. Or we go through security and we have the speculum, and like the TSA agents who see us recognize what a speculum is. This is the average person, right? It could not even get beyond. Teachers know what it is. So the level of awareness is really high, and in our marketing we have to pay so that when the word speculum is researched, we show up. The word speculum is searched more on Google than the black dress. It's a very researched item because we pay a lot for it, which was actually very interesting to me. When we take our product to doctors, especially when we're at convention centers or scientific meetings, they love it because they have not seen innovation like this in a very long time. You saw our demo kit, and when we open our demo kit, they're like, "What?" And sometimes the feedback we get from them is, "Why didn't I think of this?" Or "You stole my idea," which I love hearing that because it means it's so simple, it's so basic, and they really identify with it. So we really love it. And I think they love it more when they actually use it on patients. There is no better testimony than using it on a patient and getting feedback directly from patients. So that aspect of it has gone really well. Sometimes we hear from my doctor, this is actually really interesting. We hear, oh, my patients never complain, or that is, we do sometimes hear that from some doctors. And one thing we've learned from that is, well, patients don't know there's something else available. Like when my mom goes to get her exam, I don't think she would even say anything to her doctor. She would say, it is what it is. So we've had to kind of do a lot of education, even with women, to tell them that that another option is open to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that because I think women, being a woman, we sometimes grin and bear it. We sometimes are like, okay, I know I have to do this. This is for my health. I have to have them look inside my vagina to make sure that, like, everything is good, and they have to do a pap smear and what have you. And so I feel like a lot of women are just like, okay, it's gonna hurt for a little while. I'll breathe through it, and then I'll be good. But it's like we don't have to go through that. Like we don't
You
have
don't have
to
to
we
go
don't have
through
to go
that.
through that pain.
Exactly. It's I've listened to this podcast. It's called Retrievals. It's about a group of women who went to Yale to get infertility treatment. And one of the nurses who worked there was addicted to fentanyl. And she would, have you heard of this?
I
She
haven't,
would
no.
she would empty the vial of fentanyl, use it on herself, or partially empty it and fill it up with saline. So those poor women would go for their egg retrievals, which is a very painful process, without any anesthesia or partial anesthesia. And then they would have excruciating pain afterwards. But what was really interesting is the interviewer went through this, which was how hard it was for the women, some of them, to even admit to anybody else that they had that pain, because they thought there was something wrong with their own body. Just expressing that pain outwardly was very challenging. And then when they actually brought it up with the clinic, they were getting dismissed. Can you imagine? The clinic was getting multiple complaints like, is this pain normal? It's excruciating. I feel somebody was digging in there, and they were getting dismissed. And it was an eye opener for me to listen to that, because I realized, as women, this idea of just handle it, like you can take it, it's for a little bit, it's okay, you're not tough enough. We're just so used to it as part of our culture.
Hmm.
And I feel it's just wrong. And I actually feel like some of that is on us too, because we bring in, what did you say? Actually, you said it
Grin and
perfect.
bear it.
Grin and bear it. And it's, yeah. And it's not like, even with IUD procedures, this. I mean, it's a pain. It's typically getting an IUD, removing an IUD is very painful. And the idea that, oh, it's just a pinch and you can handle it it's like, why? Why?
Oh yeah, no, I've definitely gone through the IUD experience, and there was a one experience where I felt like it was, yeah, traumatic, where the clinician who was doing it was super nice, and I was I think in residency at the time, but I was like, okay, just like allow for this to happen. And as she's like putting it in, she can't quite get it in, and I'm just like sweating, and yeah, it wasn't a good experience. And it wasn't necessarily the speculum, it was more having the IED put in. But
Right.
for us to just have to, not have to, but just, yeah, go through those procedures, I feel like, yeah, that does affect us in the future of having a pap smear and of having, these other procedures done.
Yeah, and that's why I'm really grateful for people like yourself who have these podcasts, because I think just sharing our experiences, bringing voice to what's happening, making it okay that we can actually raise these issues and talk about them comfortably without shame. I think it's really important. Sexual health also extremely important. And I think it's a challenging topic for some women to talk about it comfortably without shame. So I'm very grateful for the work you're doing to just, aside from just bringing voice to it and raising awareness, making it okay to talk about it. And I think as other women listen to this, I feel on a day-to-day basis, there's so much we go through with our families and kids and schools and work, etc. Sometimes it's hard to pull ourselves out of it and say, oh, I need to take care of myself, and maybe I can't. And So I'm very grateful for the work you're doing to just bring awareness on the inadequacies of women's health. And it's so
Yeah.
multifaceted.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Yes, I mean, it is so multifaceted. And I feel like I'm so grateful for conferences and societies like ISHWISH. And there's another one called NAMS, or the North American Menopause Society, actually now called the Menopause Society, who that is teaching clinicians about menopause. And actually, they have a course for menopause. So if people want to do it, they, or for clinicians who want to do it and get a background in it and be an expert in it, they can go through this course, because we didn't get it in the, medical school
Visual.
residency or whatever training we were doing. So yeah, I am so grateful for these societies that are out there that are helping to normalize the conversation. And yeah, I've always wanted to do that for myself as a person, because as a clinician, because in when I was growing up, going to doctors and having the speculum exam and talking about, sexually transmitted infections and testing for it and all that stuff, it was a very shameful process, and I've always wanted to make it comfortable for the patients that I see. So, but I thank you for saying that.
Yeah. I was going to actually ask you, because I get asked this question a lot too, which is there's so much information on social media, and so many people are, part of it is actually awesome because women are sharing their experiences on Instagram and TikTok and social media. Other women are listening to it. But it turns into a point where a lot of information is just provided and presented as facts. So, how do we kind of sort through all this information and kind of pull out the nuggets that are important and factual and correct, and not gimmicky stuff that's
Mm.
just out there? It's just, that's one of the things I feel there's such an abundance of information in there. And honestly, I feel 90% of it is garbage. And there's that 10% that's good. And just making sure that information is out there and absorbable. Yeah, I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, so I mean, yes, I'm grateful for that question, because yeah, there is so much information out there, and yes, misinformation and all that. I would say, going to a lot of the medical societies. I mean, even like the ISHWISH or ISHWISH, the Menopause Society, does have information for patients to access. So I would definitely do those more notable resources. If it is an MD that is putting out the information, or even like a PhD, I feel like there's some like credibility to, that title behind the name. Also, a lot of hospitals put out medical information, so oftentimes you can kind of like look it up. I think MD, medical MD, or WebMD. I think
WebMD,
WebMD gives some good information also. So yeah, you definitely have to look to see who the author is on these, articles and
yeah,
websites. But there is some good information. I don't know. The CDC can be good, but with this current
yeah,
climate, a lot of the information on the CDC website has been changed and like taken off, especially when it comes to things related to LGBTQ
oh,
population. So, yeah, but I feel like WebMD is a good one. And usually like looking at articles that are written by credible sources, like, yeah, MD, PhD, things like that.
that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, I wanted to get back to the Nella Speculum, and I wanted to give some feedback, because I do really like, and I've thought about it also, about having like the prong that goes laterally, so we are used to the duck bill, right? Like the one that
Right.
goes up and down, but to have those like lateral prongs, I don't even know what you consider them, but it was so helpful to like fully see the cervix, because for some women there's a lot of tissue, extra tissue within the vagina, and so it makes it hard when you put that speculum in. Sometimes the side walls kind of like cave in, and so it's harder to see the speculum, or what you need to visualize. So I feel like that like lateral prong
lateral sidewall retractor.
Yes,
Crossing
yes,
back.
thank you. Is really helpful. And I know even at the Nella Speculum also had the sleeve. Yes, the sleeve that
Yeah.
you can put on also to help with like removing the extra tissue in the area. So those are like definitely kudos to the speculum.
Well, thank you for sharing that feedback. I think when we were developing our portfolio, we wanted to make sure patient comfort really front and center in the work we were doing. And I'll tell you, instead of working with a traditional device and engineering firm, I actually worked with a consumer product design and engineering firm. And then we brought in a group of clinicians who would evaluate every aspect of the product, like every aspect. We went through 981 rounds of prototyping on this speculum. So everything from it needs to fit in a man's hand and a female hand, the length, the width, everything of it we had to prototype. And some of these doctors and nurse midwives are just like very pointed. I don't like this, I don't like that. So I can't even tell you how many rounds of trial and error we had to go through to get it right. But just a few comments I wanted to say, and you probably are aware of this, but for your audience, which is typically if a woman has a higher BMI or more vaginal laxity, the general inclination is to use a bigger and wider speculum. And when you use a bigger and wider speculum, it's just more uncomfortable for the patient.
Yeah.
And there isn't, and actually, as we age, our vaginal tissues get more relaxed and they basically fold over the cervix. And in order to push that tissue back, so either clinicians use a bigger speculum or sometimes they actually cut the tip of a condom or a surgical glove and put it on a speculum. And that option doesn't work, which, to be honest, is also very disrespectful to women to cut a tip of a condom and slide it on a speculum. It just was not designed for that.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, we created View Sleeve to allow the clinician to basically slide it over the speculum so that it can push the tissue back, but also allow the clinician to use a smaller size speculum. So that was kind of the idea behind it. And then with the speculum itself, I mean, narrow is better. That's one thing I learned, which was narrow is better. But then clinicians like yourself also have to be able to see the cervix, and you have to be able to add tools into the
Yes.
speculum, like an IUD to do a procedure, or kind of the pap brush to collect the cervical cells, etc. And so that's why we designed the 4-way opening of the speculum, so allow the tip to be very narrow. And then when we designed the light to go on the upper bill, the feedback we were getting from clinicians, well, what happens when a patient is bleeding? Blood goes down. Well, when it goes down, if they're using a speculum with an integrated light, the light comes from the bottom bill. Well, you can't really see what you're doing. So we put the light on the upper bill of the speculum so that there's no need to kind of empty the speculum, take it out of the body, reinsert it, like all of the other stuff, just inefficiencies. We try to address it with the current product.
Yes, I love it. I really do. I wanted to ask you about in what ways do you see the Nella speculum impacting the future of gynecological care? And are there plans to expand its use into other areas?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We have our speculum line, which is really designed for that. We've developed a product which is still in mid R&D, really. We should be releasing it next year, which is designed for women to kickstart the exam themselves, and then the clinician can come in and use a speculum. What we actually learned was, if you put pressure on your own hand, you're able to handle it. But if somebody else comes and puts pressure on it, we don't like it. And I learned that through a mammogram, actually, which is you can put as much pressure on your breast tissue and it's okay. But if a machine comes and squeezes it, it's very uncomfortable. So what we want to do is, and this applies to a segment of the population which has extremely painful exams or can't handle anything inside their vagina. It's called vaginismus. This allows them to initiate the exam, desensitize the tissue, and then the clinician can come and do the exam. So that's our product. It's designed like a tampon, and it should be released.
So again, the patient puts in the device and then the clinician comes in afterwards.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Actually, I learned, I mean, maybe similar, I don't know, but in medical school, I remember in order to do like an abdominal exam, sometimes if a patient is ticklish or, they're usually if they're ticklish, you have the patient put their hand under or on top under your hand. And so you can push in the area and they're pushing along with it, and it helps to reduce the sensation of tickling because, you can't tickle yourself,
Yeah.
but someone
Right,
else can tickle
right,
you.
right, right. Exactly.
Yes.
So yeah, we did our clinical study. The feedback was very positive on it, but we do have to make some design changes to it. So it's in R&D right now.
Yeah. As the founder of Seek Women's Health, a medical in like the medical device industry, what challenges have you faced in bringing Nella Speculum to the market, if any?
Oh man, there are plenty of challenges. I did not. I mean, I can write a book around it. I think the first one was fundraising. I can go on and on. Raising money for a women's health product, especially in medical devices, is not easy. So I would say that was my number one challenge. Fortunately, we have a really good investor, and she's been awesome. So I feel really blessed in that area. But it was quite the journey to get to the point we are right now. I think the second part of it that really surprised me is the interaction, especially in large health system, between clinicians and procurement and sourcing. That to me was, and the bureaucracy involved in it. It's an interesting dynamic. I think 10 years ago, doctors could order whatever they wanted to order. Right now, they have to work with sourcing, and it's a completely different ball game. I think that also surprised me. And then the third one was I wanted to go direct. Actually, we did not want to use a distributor, but I can't tell you how many middlemen are in this process to get a product to the clinician and how powerful they are, from distributors to group purchasing organizations. And there's so many layers there, and I was surprised by that, to be honest. I mean, right now we're actually working with distributors, but we weren't planning on doing it, but they're everywhere. So they own the supply chain. So
Yeah. And why do you think that there's not a lot of money in funding women's healthcare research or like women associated devices? Like why do you think that there's not a lot of money in it?
well, if I take a step back, I mean, half the population of the US is women, right?
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
150 million women. So it's just surprising on how little investment, and you alluded to this very early on, goes into women's research. But I don't know. I mean, it's just very strange to me how, and the one thing I've learned as an entrepreneur, which is it's not only the first money you raise, because you can never commercialize with $1 million. Just to be very, when it comes to medical devices and pharmaceutical product, it is a journey. Like, it's taking it through clinical trials, regulatory approval, hiring a field force. It has milestones. So I do feel whoever's going to make a commitment is a commitment from start to finish, and that will add up to be about 50 to $60 million. It's not that just first $1 million to get in. So, and there aren't that many investors. I think I do want to say there are a handful of women who really made a big difference in the fundraising world and investing in women's research. One is Mackenzie Bezos. She really, I mean, she's given $19 billion of her own money away. I don't think she gets enough credit for the work she's done in this space. I think Melinda Gates is another woman. She really has done so good in this world. They're not our investors, but I see what they have done, and I'm very grateful, because 10 years ago, they weren't even here, and the fundraising world was so much worse. And I think there are probably a lot of women behind them too. These are the two big names that I can think of that really have revolutionized investing in women's health. I think Jill Biden and Maria Shriver did a lot. I don't think especially Jill Biden, gets credit for the work she did, which was allocating $2 billion for the first time ever into women's health research. That had never been done before. And regardless of which side of the political arena people are, I feel they should value dollars going into women's health research. And I just, yeah, I look at women's health honestly as something that isn't political. I think it's all of us want it, need it for our children and for our grandchildren, and that's why I want to recognize some of these women who have just, you know, they've just done an awesome job in attracting investment into women's health by investing themselves in this space and being very diligent about it.
Mm, yes. Well, thank you for letting us know who those people are. I mean, because when I think about it, I mean, in my mind, and I mean, just looking at articles and news, and I feel like most investors are men, right? And so, why are they going to want into? Why are they going to want to invest into a women's health product when it's not necessarily for them? But yeah, I'm grateful to these investors who are women who are making pushes into and funding women's health research
Yeah.
and so forth.
Yeah, I feel they've really changed the landscape in a major way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so I wanted to, as we come to a close, just ask how vulva owners can get a hold of the Nella Speculum, especially if it's not offered in the hospital that they go to or the clinic that they go to, but they want to have a more comfortable exam from their clinician.
Great question. So we have the Nella Comfort Kit now available for purchase by patients to take it to their clinician. It comes into, it's registered with the FDA also. It comes into 4 custom kits. So we have a classic kit, a curvy kit, a menopause kit, and a maternal kit. It's available through our website, nellaspec.com. And what it includes is obviously the speculum is front and center in the kit, but what we've included is some what I consider common sense products. So there's a pair of socks for the stirrups. We've included lubrication, water-based lubrication. We've included wipes after the exam. Women can clean themselves in a respectful way. We've included a lavender balm. We sponsor professional women's soccer. So to be playful, we've included a squeezy ball. And then depending on which kit, there are some custom items for menopausal women, for example, versus women who are pregnant. So the kits are a little bit different. So those are. Yeah, we're very excited about that too. It is approved. Women can use their health savings account, which is their HSA or FSA, to also pay for it.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love how it is tailored to different parts of life. Because I mean, I understand, as a doctor that, in menopause, the estrogen has decreased. And so the tissue is not as elastic as it once was. And so a different speculum, or a different kit for a woman in menopause versus, pregnancy versus what have you. Like I like that you guys have taken that into consideration.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, honestly, when we were, I never thought that we would be pulling a kit and selling the speculum to women. It just never crossed my mind. But we were getting flooded from requests coming through our website, and actually people emailing me directly asking if they could buy the speculum and take it to their doctor. And I was a little bit surprised by it, but we did a lot of research and we realized, unfortunately, we live in a time and era where insurance companies don't cover the speculum. Clinics are under a lot of cost pressures, and this gives women the choice. I think clinics still offer high quality care with devices that are approved. This option also gives women the choice to buy the kit should they choose to do so and take it to their clinician. And I can tell you the ones that really we've sold a lot of are moms buying the kit for their daughters going to their first exams,
Oh.
and our menopausal kit have been 2 of our biggest sellers.
Hmm. Wow. Well, I'm so grateful for Ceek Women's Health. I am like excited to see what the future brings for you all. And I am so grateful for you being on this podcast and sharing the Nella Speculum with everyone because it really is, it's a game changer. Like it says on the website, it's revolutionary because we've been using the same thing for centuries and it's definitely time for a change. So thank you, Fahti, for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cara. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye.